Let's walk through exactly what happened last night if you're just waking up. This is how the scene played out at the White House yesterday. Hundreds of protesters had been gathered peacefully in Lafayette Park just outside the White House, chanting and holding signs. Around 6:10 p.m. Eastern Time, Attorney General William Barr was spotted walking through the park, surveying the scene with a security detail. Then at 6:15, the president tweeted he would be making brief remarks in the Rose Garden on the federal response to the nationwide protests. 20 minutes later, around 6:35, police fired flashbang shells and mounted officers began to push protesters back in the park. Here's how MSNBC correspondent Garrett Hake described what was taking place.
Mounted police have been coming down the street. You're going to see them in the frame now, using flashbangs in front of them and mounted police to clear what has been an entirely peaceful protest. Not 98%, not 99%, but 100% peaceful protest here today. People throwing, there was no throwing of water bottles, there was no throwing of objects, but a short time ago, mounted police officers have been clearing the street.
MSNBC's Garrett Hake reporting there last night. Then at 6:43 p.m., the president walked out into the Rose Garden and delivered remarks for about 7 minutes, taking no questions. We'll have more on what he said in just a moment. About 15 minutes later, President Trump, along with several senior members of his administration, left the White House and, with that park cleared, walked to St. John's Episcopal Church. There, the president stopped briefly and, as Mika said, held up a Bible. When a reporter asked if it was his Bible, he replied, "It is a Bible." He made brief remarks calling the United States the greatest country in the world before walking back to the White House. When asked whether Lafayette Park was cleared of protesters in order to accommodate President Trump's visit to the church, the White House released a statement that reads in part, "The perimeter was expanded to help enforce the 7 p.m. curfew in the same area where rioters attempted to burn down one of our nation's most historic churches the night before." So, Jonathan Lemire, you cover this White House very closely. We all agree it's a disgrace that St. John's Church was attempted to be burned down 2 nights ago. It was not, thank God. But let's talk about why the president did this. There's been a lot of reporting, including from people I've talked to, that say the president did not like the story out there that he was in a bunker rage tweeting while other leaders were out in the streets addressing these protesters and talking about their concerns. How did this entire evening come about from the White House?
Well, Willie, you hit on part of it there. So let's back up a few more steps here. The protests grew violent and sort of out of hand on Friday night at Lafayette Park across from the White House. And that was the moment when the Secret Service was sort of unprepared in some ways for the sheer size and scope of these protests. And out of concern, rushed the president to the underground bunker at the White House, one normally reserved for use during terrorist attacks. That's where Vice President Cheney was taken on September 11th. The president had made one public appearance. We saw him on Saturday. He traveled to Florida for the rocket launch there, but otherwise had been holed up in the White House. We didn't see him on Sunday, and we didn't see him for most of yesterday. The plan was hatched during the day. The president, obviously, and those around him were upset about the fire. The president, of course, also is keeping an eye on his poll numbers with evangelicals, a group that he won handily in 2016, but has seen some support slip in recent months during the coronavirus pandemic. We saw the night before more fires at Lafayette Park, the image of the White House going dark at 11 p.m., which is standard procedure. It often goes dark around 11 for security reasons, but yet the striking contrast between the shadows of the White House and then the fires at Lafayette Park. And then, of course, we had everything that happened yesterday, including the president in a teleconference call with governors urging them to deploy the National Guard, telling them they're looking like fools, saying they were weak, fighting with Democratic governors on the call, saying they needed to be tough, they needed to squash and dominate the streets, put protesters in prison for 5-10 years, he said, whatever it took. And then, of course, we had him speak in the Rose Garden yesterday, announced that he would, if needed, send American soldiers to American cities to keep them safe, in his words. An extraordinary development, extraordinary declaration that he would make. And as he's doing that the split screen that captivated a nation, as he's talking from the Rose Garden, you could hear the tear gas canister explosions behind him. You could hear the park being cleared. all for a photo op, Willie, as he then strode across the park and stood awkwardly with a Bible in front of a church, surrounded by members of his senior staff and cabinet, all of whom, it must be noted, at a time of racial unrest, all of them were white.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.